Hello, everyone. My name is Paweł Zegarłowicz, and on a daily basis, I'm the president of the City Handlowy Foundation, Kronenberg Foundation, and I have the honor to welcome you here and support the organizers so that day one of our Congress goes as smoothly as possible. If the 4 people on the way ask me here today, why are you doing this for the second time? Well, it means that this is something, there's something going on here. Professor Pawłowicz told me first that, okay, take it easy. The agenda is so strong, you just take it easy. It just make sure to stick to the agenda in terms of the times. On the other hand, you're in the foundation, you're doing it at a voluntary basis, and it's important to us as well. But this is the official version only. The truth is that I've been here for over a dozen years as a participant, and I've always believed that this is the most important event in a year for the financial sector because of its topics, the guests, and the atmosphere as a whole. So I really have stage fright. You may believe in me or not, that's why I'm here in a tie, and I'm going to stick to the agenda in terms of the times, so that everything that's been planned by the organizers to be really fit into this day. Please believe me, us starting on a high note, and the end will be even better than the beginning. But why so? Well, first of all, we are going to have special guests. And let's be honest here. The Congress's strong point has always been that we have the most important guests here, and today is no different. So please note, this is happening on a very important day, where a very important meeting is taking place on the eastern border, and here we have 2 constitutional ministers here. So welcome to. Yes, I have to read from a piece of paper because, you'll see that we have many special guests. Andrzej Domański, our Minister of Finance. And Jakub Jaworowski, the Minister of State Assets. So we are here in the region of Pomorskie, in Sopot, so let me also welcome Beata Rutkiewicz, the Voivod of the Pomorskie region. And Magdalena Czarzyńska-Jachim, the Mayor of Sopot. Senator Bogdan Borusewicz. Professor Piotr Stepnowski, director of the University of Gdańsk. Apologies, it's not Warsaw University, it's Gdańsk University. It's a renowned university as well. Jan Krzysztof Bielecki, Prime Minister, and the chair of the program board of the Congress. We have Jacek Jastrzębski, chair of the Polish Financial Supervision Authority. KNF. Maciej Szczęsny, president of the Bank Guarantee Fund. The Congress's organizer has for years been the Center for Strategic Mindset. And I checked it last year as a host here, and well, they said, don't talk about us, we are the least important here, but you know that this is not the case. So allow me, please, to also welcome on your behalf Professor Leszek Pawłowicz, Vice President of the Center for Strategic Mindset and the coordinator of the European Financial Congress, and the person who has initiated this very Congress for you. Elżbieta Marquardt, also Vice President of the Center, a person who has an iron hand in a silk glove, and she prepares the agenda every year so that it looks so perfectly as this year. So a very warm welcome to you too. The organizers have always been modest and humble, and before I came here, he said, remember about our partners, remember about the participants, and if so, we need to say that the main partner is PKO BP. the bank and has been a partner for 10 years without break. And main media partners of the Congress this year: Bankier PL, Business Insider, Gazeta Prawna Daily, Forbes, Pub Business, and Talk FM radio station. These are the main media who have come here and are going to broadcast what's going to happen during the Congress. They're going to broadcast it, and if so, we need to encourage them to do it, right? And the participants, yourselves. There is no other such meeting in Poland where so many, so important people would come, people in the financial sector, and they come here so reliably and sensibly, and they talk with each other, they exchange information, and they change the beating pulse of the financial world. You create the quality of this meeting. That's what I believe, and I think it is a good time for all of us, special guests, the organizers, partners, so that we can all thank one another and welcome one another and wish one another a great Congress. It is the 13th Congress this year. And now for some technical information. The plenary part of the Congress is broadcast online in streaming. There is a lot of equipment this year. So let me begin that there is an app. If you don't have it yet, around you, you will see QR codes. You can scan it, and just downloading and installing it takes a minute and a half. It's very user-friendly, and you can find out very quickly what happens where. So I really encourage you to download this app and install it. It's a tool that's going to come in handy later, and the results will be broadcast worldwide. So I encourage you to use it. Really take your time and scan the QR code and install it. And secondly, there is the Slido app. And like last year, there will be voting going on in this room. And the results will be broadcast worldwide as well. These are the results, the outcomes of our Congress. Where can you find it? You can see it on the screens. And that's it as regards the technicalities. And now, most importantly, in terms of the content, so we have had our welcomes, and now the opening ceremony. So I would like to ask Mr. Andrzej Domański, the Minister of Finance, to join me here on the stage. Apologies, but it seems that changes not always mean that you get the desired result. So now it's over to the host of our city, Madam Mayor Magda Czarzyńska-Jachim, and later I will take 15 minutes to give you a report of what we've done, and then the Minister of Finance, and then the Minister of State Assets, and that is the final agenda. So now over to Madam Mayor. I don't know if it bodes well for the work between the local and central government, but anyway, welcome everyone on this beautiful morning after a very successful Sunday. And I've got to tell you that Sopot has always been a place for important meetings, but it's also a place of citizens who know what they're doing. 58.55% attendance at the election. It speaks for itself. Congratulations to our people. And speaking of figures, I'm very happy to see Mr. Prime Minister, the Senator, Mr. Ministers, and yourselves who come from the world of finance. So please allow me to wish you good and successful meetings. The topics are not easy and the times are not stable. So I would like to appeal to all of you, on behalf of all the local government people. They had a session here last month during local government trends. Please support us in our work to improve and stabilize local government finances. So, Minister of Finance, Mr. Domański, thank you so much for talking to us that there are specific proposals out there that the government can see the total breakdown in local authority finances. An example, several years ago, 2% of cities have a deficit. Now it's almost 60% in deficit. So why am I appealing to you? Well, it's not that I want to follow my election agenda during the last election, but basically because this situation is important to all of us. If there is no improvement in local government finances, if this year the situation does not improve, we will not be able to make use of the recent of the National Recovery Program funds and European funds. Most of them, especially in the recovery program, these are debt instruments, which are also serviced by the state. So there is some interest on your behalf too, but this is an opportunity to us all, to the people, to the government, and to Europe as a whole, because only if there is strong Poland in solidarity with Europe, it's only together that we can face what's happening beyond our eastern border and face all the changes and crises, financial crises. So I wish you good meetings. Please remember, there will be no strong Poland without strong local government. So I wish you a good time, enjoyable time in Sopot, a European spa. Thank you. Yes, so I'm here now. If it turned out that they are changing the agenda again, they would push me out altogether. And we, the older people, know very well how to stay afloat. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear ministers, Madam Mayor, celebrated guests, I would like to begin not with our traditional wording that we are meeting at the European Financial Congress, which never sleeps. But I would like to start with words of gratitude, because we have to say this, that several years back, over those past years, those past years were more difficult than now, at least from the perspective of the organizers. And so I would like to thank you very much. Thank you to all of you, people of goodwill, and all the participants, because your presence, like people say in English, you vote with your feet, and you have shown everyone that it's an important place for the financial community. Regardless of the market situation, we meet to talk openly, and we feel that we need each other. So I would like to thank all the participants of the program board, because the program board, it's 64 members who work throughout the year on our agenda by supporting each other, by having discussions and looking for the best solutions ever. But the environment of the Congress is also made up of all our partners, not just the city of Sopot, but also financial institutions, capital market institutions, infrastructure of the sector, 150 experts who work with us on creating this agenda, and other other parts of the European Financial Congress projects. We all know that it is more than just this grand finale today. Today we are meeting at this great celebration. And hopefully over the several days you are going to see the most important people for the Polish financial sector, who will tell you what they would like the sector to operate like in the future, so that our work together goes as well as possible. But apart from the EKF as a congress, we also have the academy of our congress. And we came up with that idea 11 years ago. And this community of the academy is more than 1,000 people, young people, those who, owing to your support and good wishes for the academy, yes, you gave them the opportunity not just to come here and take part in discussions, and I'll tell you more about it in a moment, because the academy is celebrating 11 years today, but also to be able to tell you about topics important to them. So our debate, Oxford Sopot debate, as usual, will be dedicated to the topic: how should the European Union develop further? Should we aim at greater integration? But the Congress is also about a report from those many experts who work with us. They will show you the macroeconomic challenges and the forecasts for Poland. It has been done since 2018, published twice a year. And hopefully, well, an hour ago, we had the 13th report published. So you're welcome even now to the round table of our Congress about the forecasts and the consensus between various experts on their vision of the Polish, of the national economy measures. During the pandemic, we also introduced a product. Well, it's a horrible word, but yes, it's 15 minutes with the Congress, because everyone switched to online, and then we tried to do it online too. Just over a dozen minutes or so, we tried to tell you what was going on, what the chairs of large institutions thought, and because these 15 minutes of our Congress, well, sometimes a little more or less, well, because it was accepted so well, we are going to have an in-person edition of it in Sopot, entitled Gen AI, or Traveling to the Future, or Galloping Reality. The Congress also includes books and publications. During this Congress, we are going to have 4 publications, 4 new launches, such as, for example, what we would change in Poland and in Europe, essays from the Congress's Academy members, the 10th such publication from the Academy. We are going to have a publication of the Responsible Finance Club by Kamil Pruchnik, PhD, and it is, well, it is going to, it's the publication that received the 2nd award in the competition of the Bank Guarantee Fund, and it was a competition for papers on the financial stability mechanism. And we are going to have launches of reports prepared together with our partners. So, Green Finances in Poland 2024, and the risks related to excessive public debt 2024. As we know, the Congress is also about recommendations which we draft over those several days, and the aim is to improve the functioning of the economy. I can see, yes, my competition is at work here. So yes, I will speed up a little, but it's not easy. I'd like to say that this Congress is the grand finale, the great celebration, but I would also like to thank you very much for participating.
For your participation and support of a debate at the following events: the Congress of Corporate Banking and Investment Banking, Congress of Retail Banking, Congress of Consumer Finance, Congress dealing with IT and financial institutions, Insurance Congress, and last but not least, management of risk and capital in banks. So, as you can see, there are quite a few events during a year, and today we have this big celebration of opening the 3-day event where we will sum everything up and possibly also develop some recommendations. And last but not least, together with the Financial Supervision Commission since February 2022, we have a seminar on risk and regulation in the banking sector. Also, we have a club of responsible finances at EKF, which has just finished work on creating a model draft on preparing a mortgage credit agreement. So this is, we'll have a presentation from my somewhat older colleague, who, 4 days to be exact, who for many years have been trying to propose and offer to market regulators and those who offer mortgage agreements a certain standard, as well as the chairman of Insurance Consumer Protection Agency and Financial Inspection Institution. So in cooperation with McKinsey, the committee also has started preparing a housing policy for Poland, yet another very important step. And finally, we have EKF Research, an initiative which started in February last year, and in about an hour we'll have a presentation on that. EKF, do global capital flow build democracy? So that will be the title of the presentation. As you can see, EKF means a lot of events during the entire year, which brings together the entire group of finance experts. And I can add that today we have a great finale, a great celebration of that cycle of events. And I do hope I will be able to put forward some really great recommendations. And we also have a new recommendation. I'd like to spend a minute on it. We are starting with Corporate Governance Academy at EKF. And the goal here is to increase the quality of management supervision on capital companies in Poland. So in connection with that, we invite you to join us at the session on relations of supervisory board with other entities in modern policy of corporate governance. And I can with pleasure say that the Academy is under the patronage of the Minister of State Assets, and despite change at that position, that patronage has not been withdrawn. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. And finally, we have an initiative which Madam President has already reminded us of, local trends that we are doing together with the International Poznan Fair team. And the goal here is to conduct a debate discussion on the economic development in the context of self-government. So local trends is they are the authors of the self-government Congress in Sopot, as well as a similar event in Poznan. And we have something exceptional today as well. We'll have a a discussion on the price of honor. It's the fruit of an initiative of the Center of Strategic Thought, one of the organizers of EKF, which has set this price of honorary title for those who are distinguished in the development of Polish state financing system. This is an award for those people, which is to honor those people whose activity has helped in the stable development of our sector. And this year, the title, the only honorary title, has been presented by the Capitol. The laureate is Wojciech Kwaśniak, the former president of the Commission of Financial Supervision. So thank you very much. I'm very happy that we do have our laureate, and the conversation with him will be held by Sławomir Sikora, a member of the Capitol behind this honorary title, as well as a member of the Program Council of EKF, as well as the chairman of the Bank Handlowy Supervisory Board. I've nearly ended, so just a couple of words on somewhat different perspective. I think that in these times, saying that EKF and Congress never sleep, it's not saying enough, because these days when so much is happening, EKF also has to be the place where in connection with the challenges that are all around us, we can create new, very much needed initiatives. Why is that? Well, when I'm looking at the life of think tanks in Europe, if I look at what they're preparing for in Europe, what they're debating about, then my colleagues from the European Council for International Relations, for example, we can see a lot being done on a plan for European economy at the time of war, as they say, and as they say in English, war economy, which changes significantly the approach to principles of financing, procedures, regulations, and creates a need to adapt to the new geopolitical situation, the way that EU functions. And here everyone has to answer the simple question: what new steps, what new actions are being done to strengthen that single most important word in these times, that is the safety of Europe, safety of our homeland, and what can we do here? I think that if we could go down from that geopolitical perspectives a bit more down, being a bit more local, I hope that during these few days of meetings, of debates, of discussions, I hope we'll be able to put that little part that's our own to these big changes that are happening all around us, so that we can move a few things forward. One of such things, which is dear to me, has been dear for a number of years, is a question of financing Swiss francs credits. We are the last country which has not been able to deal with that issue, that hasn't regulated it completely. So I think that closing that crisis, finding a formula of compromise, of agreement, would be a fantastic way of showing that the sector, which is so important for the economy, instead of building billion-dollar reserves for additional methods, for future methods of financing the franc crisis, it's using these resources to finance real economy, happening economy. So hopefully we will talk about what conditions can help adding resources to the competitiveness of Polish economy, to its development, so that the banks find it more profitable to finance credit activity rather than locate their capital in central banks. And finally, last but not least, and it would be a total miracle if in that atmosphere of understanding and better cooperation, if a miracle worker would appear who would add to these new challenges, to this need to create our own Polish approach. We would have a central bank whose communication policy would be relatively foreseeable, predictable, and that would not deal with disinformation, because I'm afraid that we were the first bank which has taken which has had the place of the last one reacting to inflation. I think we can also be the first bank which will realize that inflation is gone. So such a miracle here, hopefully in Sopot, a miracle by the sea, would be very much needed, because that would be our very important contribution to the changing reality in the world. So I wish you the best possible Congress, and once again, thank you, because it is you who, in your presence, in your activity, create this Congress. Without you, the Congress can't be carried out. Nothing will replace you, those who believe that that it's worthwhile to come to Sopot. So, Prime Minister Jan Krzysztof Bielecki, the chairman of the program board, and before that, Madam President of Sopot. What can I say? I'm sorry, and thank you very much for allowing us to be here in this wonderful city once again, because this definitely affects the atmosphere of EKF. And now, in accordance with the program, we'll give the floor to the government. So please allow me to invite Andrzej Domański, Minister of Finance. Nie ma znaczenia. Good afternoon. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you for being in this most important event of the world of finance in Poland. The European Financial Congress is one of the a number of events that shows us the activity of Polish economic thought. We are meeting in the first half of June, and I can't ignore the date of historical changes in Poland, which was started here in Poland 35 years ago. The members of those events are here. The partial free elections of the 4th of June started a process of key changes. After 35 years, we can say that our economy is an example of a great success of transformation between 1990 and 2023 in real our per capita GDP has increased threefold. Our economic development growth was the highest, not just in Europe, but in the world, has been among the highest. Today, Poland is the 6th biggest economy of the EU and one of the most important engines of its growth. And we know why and thanks to whom we are where we are. We are here thanks to brave changes which took place at the beginning of the transformation. We're here thanks to the Polish spirit of entrepreneurship, and we are here thanks to using the chances that accession to the EU gave us. However, it's obvious, at least for me, that we want more. We have aspirations and obligations for other generations to want more. Today, nearly 8 months after a big victory of the new coalition, It is obvious to me, and we can say it quite clearly, that the win of the 15th of October not only gives us the new chances, new opportunities, but also presents us with new obligations. To meet those, we have to understand very well what sort of changes our external environment is going through, what's happening in the world. And looking at the events of recent years, we can say that it's a rude awakening from the vision of the end of history, which has proven itself to be an illusion. And currently we are facing many parallel crises, consequences of pandemic, multiplying war conflicts, including the barbaric aggression of Russia onto Ukraine, cyber attacks, hybrid war at our eastern border, climate crisis. These are just a few phases of this polycrisis. We are moving from the times of increasing global cooperation, integration, towards growing competition, and sometimes even hostility between the biggest trading blocs. I think today is the time to lose our naivete in the world, which in the last epoch of turbo globalization integrated very much. This withdrawal creates great tensions. China is responsible today for 21% of imports to the EU countries. Despite increasing number of debates about sovereignty and safety in the EU, this dependency is increasing, and this applies to Poland too. Chinese companies more and more often win over sectors where traditionally European manufacturers had the first place. Last year, every fifth electric car in Europe came from China. The problem will not be solved by such solution as Sebon, because European industry is based to a large degree on importing raw materials from outside of Europe. So we have to talk about how to provide European companies with equal conditions for competing. We know what catastrophic consequences, economic and geopolitical, caused the dependency of some of the EU countries on Russian natural resources, especially Russian gas. Today we have to avoid such dependency when it comes to supply of critical metals or rare metals, which are mostly imported from countries which are authoritarian in nature. We have some hope here when it comes to resources discovered in Sweden and Norway. However, we have to watch over supply chains, watch over our safety when it comes to access to key resources. Also, changes are taking place in the global financing system. Developing countries are building their own financial infrastructure, including alternative international payment systems. In comparison to the European SWIFT, these systems are still at a very early stage of development, and nevertheless, these initiatives should not be ignored. Simultaneously, increase of international tensions results in the relocation of some of the investments to Europe. Estimates show that in the years 2022-2023, the value of direct investments in 15 most important countries of Central Eastern Europe and North Africa amounted to $85 billion, which means an increase of 62% in comparison to the former period. Poland, without doubt, is among the biggest beneficiaries of friendshoring and nearshoring. However, we do want more, that's obvious, and we want these processes to be conducted with even greater intensity. That's why we are very much open to foreign investments. Coming back to the core of the EU, and the upcoming presidency of Poland will allow us to answer global challenges in a way which we could have only dreamt about a year ago. Our comeback to the European decision-making table means not just that we want to take care of Polish business in Brussels. It also shows our obligation to actively shape the future of the European community. Yesterday's elections, yesterday's victory only shows the importance of that obligation. Ahead of us, ladies and gentlemen, not just challenges which come from outside of our borders. We also have many internal problems, issues. Those who shape economic processes cannot simply ignore these challenges. The world discusses the question of hydrogen, nuclear fusion, intelligent networks. And in Poland, we are still talking about how long to keep traditional mines alive from the money of taxpayers. So here we need to ask a very important question, whether our development model is in fact efficient in the view of today's challenges. Do we still want to race? The theme of this session fits well into this debate. I can answer that yes, we want to keep racing and we want to fight for more. However, in my view, some of the engines which has advanced our economic growth are less and less efficient.
And I think they're even running out of validity. We can no longer compete with lower labor costs. The demographics are not going to support us. On the scale of growing economy, the inflow of EU funds is less and less significant, although it is still remaining very important. We need to cover huge outlays related to energy transitions and the necessity to ensure external security to Poland and extra investments in infrastructure. A large part of these investments needs and has to come from private investors. So naturally, this is a task for the financial market, which in recent years has faced a number of difficulties. Its role in the economy decreased instead of growing. And to symbolize this, there was a decreasing capitalization of Polish companies listed on the Warsaw Stock Exchange from 30% to 30%. The change of the 15th of October did bring a long-expected upswing. WIG grew by 28%. But change is necessary and needs to be comprehensive and far-reaching. Worldwide, financial markets are driven and the entire economies are driven by the private equity market, which finances the most innovative companies which grow the fastest. In Poland, in my opinion, lost out compared to other countries. But we have a number of assets here, competitive market infrastructure, and very well-skilled experts. And they will allow us to change Poland, transfer Poland into one of the most important financial centers on the continent, focused on the most prospective segments of the market. I want to ensure you that at the Ministry of Finance we are already taking steps to help in achieving this goal. We are also actively participating in discussions on the EU level about capital markets. But first of all, we have to start with energy transition. In my opinion, it is the key to transforming the entire economy. All the discussions about siting large projects into data centers, everything begins with stable and clean energy sources. And in Poland, unfortunately, they end at this question. Even now, we know that technological companies list access to energy as a key challenge to AI. The International Energy Agency estimates that in 2022, data centers worldwide consumed 460 terawatt-hours, nearly 3 times more than Poland. In 2026, this amount, as per forecast, will increase by 1,000 terawatt-hours. So these figures keep growing, and they will keep growing. So one question to ChatGPT uses 10 times more energy than a single query in Google search engine. So it's obvious that to meet technological transformation, we have to have green transition at the same time in Polish energy sector. Poland can extend its economic sector, which started 35 years ago, but only if we don't close ourselves up in our in our self-contentment, and we face the challenges of the world. In order to do this, we need a strong and stable financial system which can finance investment in modernizing energy, the defense sector, and infrastructure. And we want to do it. We want these conditions and security, starting with the external security and financial security, including public finance. These are going to be the key for the stability and safety and security of the Polish economy. And to conclude, you perhaps know the Ministry of Finance is forecasting that this year Polish economy is going to grow at a rate exceeding 3%. Next year, as per our forecasts, the Polish economy will grow by nearly 4%. The Polish economy is coming back to its just place. Some of the fastest growing European states, but today we can't get too complacent with good prospects in 12 or 16 months. Our responsibility for the economy has to be measured in decades rather than months. I am convinced that many discussions and reflections at this year's Financial Congress will allow us to build a strong and stable economy in our country. Thank you very much. Andrzej Domański, the Minister of Finance, Poland, the first opening speech. We are staying with the government now, but just one technical piece of information, because the European Financial Congress is proud of having so many participants, a room full, but it is not our ambition for the guests to just listen to all the information while standing. So on the one hand, we're so happy that you are here, but in Columbus E room, you can watch this very same presentations as here. So there are seats available there, so you are welcome to use those seats. And now it's over to the Minister of State Assets, Jakub Jaworowski. So the next opening speech. Over to you. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much to the organizers, to Professor Leszek Pawłowicz, to Jan Krzysztof Bielecki for inviting me and for this opportunity to share my reflections at this opening ceremony. It's a great honor. I also congratulate the speakers before me because, yes, the bar has been raised very high. I would like to tell you some things about corporate governance and even more widely about it from the Ministry of State Assets perspective. Many of you present in this room perhaps know more about it than me, about companies which are under the supervision of the Ministry of State Assets. But let me just tell you what kind of assets we are talking about. The companies supervised by our ministry are responsible for 15% of Poland's GDP. They're about 40% of Warsaw Stock Exchange capitalization, and they're responsible for more than half of the WIG20 index. And they are active in almost every sector of the economy. And in some, they dominate, such as, for example, in the financial sector. This is an enormous potential. The tragic geopolitical turbulence opens up new opportunities in some areas. I'm not going to dwell on it, because Minister Domański has beautifully described all that. But let me just tell you that friendshoring, nearshoring, new policies, new EU programs, they are all an opportunity also for these companies which have state treasury shareholding. So it is really a good place to talk about challenges. Total shareholder return in many key, the biggest companies with state shareholding, it's close to the median compared to the same companies worldwide. To some of them, they are close to the bottom of these rankings. Financial institutions are looking quite well, but generally speaking, we are sort of in the medium part of the ranking. We are far from the top. And besides, the companies with state ownership, they are responsible for half of CO2 emissions. It depends on the sector, but this is definitely a huge challenge. So we have to cope with this challenge, first of all, because it is a burden for the financial results of these companies, and secondly, more importantly, because we are responsible towards future generations. And thirdly, these companies face very specific challenges. There are risks related to mega projects, olefins, polymers, renewables, business portfolio adjustments, assets. And speaking of the financial sector and banks especially, this is also another package of specific challenges. But let me focus on just one of them, on the capability of the Polish banking sector to finance the economy. Now, this potential is growing all the time, but we are still lagging behind Europe. One of the advisory companies estimates that it's about 400 billion zlotys, so some 13% of GDP. But in the Czech Republic, it's 30% of GDP, and in Spain, it's 37% of GDP. And definitely increasing this potential depends to some extent on regulations, but it also depends on how banks themselves operate. And some estimates say that we would be able to even double these capabilities. And this is a key issue, key point, because we are facing huge challenges regarding financing the Polish economy, for example, green transition. So there are things to work on, definitely. I hope that it's no secret, but exactly a month ago, when we were preparing for a presentation by the Minister of Culture and us three ministers, we were waiting in a room before the entrance to the room where the journalists were waiting. Prime Minister Tusk stood next to me and he asked me, are you scared? And I said, yes. And he said, good. And I'm telling you this not because I have this special need to share the political back office with you, but I'm telling you this for two reasons. One, Prime Minister Tusk and myself as well are fully aware of the challenges that we are facing. And secondly, I believe that this concern can be sobering. And I would even say that without such concerns, it would not be a good thing to approach such massive challenges. So the thing is, we need to approach these challenges head on. We need to identify them and address them without fear. So how do we do it and where do we want to go? The mandate of the Ministry of State Assets is to permanently increase the value of companies, including the state's economic policy. This dual goal, we have various applications depending on the company. And these companies should have clear plan for action focused on developing its core business. So these goals should be defined on the level of sectors and then the companies as such. But one thing is for sure, we have to place great emphasis. Yes, I think it's some sign to me that I need to finish. Yes, I think there's not much left. So we need to place great emphasis on increasing the value of companies, because without that, reaching this other goal of supporting the economic goals, the economic policy of the state will not be possible. So we have to build value. And let me come back to some figures. The median of price profit in the stock exchange is about 5, and TSR is about 2. for the S&P 350 Europe companies, it's 13 and 6.4 respectively. So 2.5 and 3 times more. Not to mention S&P 500, that it's 18.1 and 9.6. So if we were to get the median of this indicator in the sectors, that would generate an extra 130 billion zlotys in value, 130 billion. But this 130 billion opportunity has to be also viewed critically, because in a sense it is a value gap in some way, and for some reason Polish companies don't obtain high indexes, price value or TSR. And not optimized corporate governance is responsible for some of it. So we want to support Polish champions, and the road to this goal goes through solid and stable corporate governments. We will build Polish champions. If Polish businesses are managed by competent managers, when companies have efficient governance policies, and when they focus on their core sectors, where they have the greatest competencies to do business. And here, attracting talent is a challenge. There was this study in 21 when 3,000 people were asked about their preferences. Only 11% said that they wanted to work in an organization with Polish equity. So what does the ministry do in this respect? First of all, the ministry has a team for good practices, good governance practices, to draft a code for that. The work is ongoing. We invite experts, consultancy companies, we discuss with them, we gather experience. At the last meeting, we had Wiesław Rozłucki with us, hopefully not for the last time. We want to use the models from other countries. We are looking at various governments and to see how they manage their assets. We are also working together with the European Financial Congress, like you heard today already. And together, tonight, we are going to launch the Corporate Governance Academy. You are welcome to attend this event and more events in the series. So to sum up, today, Polish companies are in top ranks of Central Eastern Europe rankings. But looking all over across Europe, Orlen is only in the 44th place. PGE, 232nd place. That is not enough. We should be much higher in those rankings. We should have both European and global champions among our companies. So to answer the question in the topic, do we still want to keep racing? Yes, we do, and we need to. We have to do it. And the road to success in this race is through healthy, sound, transparent procedures, skilled management, transparent action, and rule of law, following the law. So that is sound corporate governance, in other words. The Ministry of State Assets will help companies where it has shares so that they can prepare for this race properly. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you good meetings. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Minister. Minister Jakub Jaworowski, Minister of State Assets. Now, as regards the events regarding the lighting and sound, we are going, yes, there is this, we are going to have a remote connection. Sometimes they can be emotional because of technology, but we have to have it. The Congress is about important meetings here and also beyond Poland. And now we are going to have such an important element. Next opening speech, keynote speech about a very important topic, enabling financial access for companies in transition. We will have a celebrated guest from abroad, Helena Viñes-Fiestas, Chair, European Platform on Sustainable Finance and Commissioner of the Spanish Financial Markets Authority.
It's great to have you as a special guest. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear Minister of Finance, dear Minister of State Assets, dear President of the Polish Financial Supervisory Authority, dear authorities, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to everyone. Dzień dobry. I learned very recently that Poland and Spain share a very particular legacy of history. At the times of the Industrial Revolution, nations saw railways as the key to economic prosperity, and each European country was eager to lay down a vast railway infrastructure. But interesting enough, while the standard gauge, that is the width of the train tracks, was roughly 1.4 meters across most of Europe, both for Poland and Spain, they were larger gauges. Poland and Spain opted for larger gauges. Poland's choice was influenced by Russia at the time, and Spain's by a desire to keep the French out, or so the legend goes. But this divergence in railways gauges was later seen as a barrier to economic growth and to the integration with Europe. This is why Poland, as soon as it regained independence, standardized its railway gauges to align with the rest of Europe. Meanwhile, Spain did so when it built its high-speed train network. Like the iron tracks that span our continent, we now need to deploy low-carbon infrastructure and transform our energy and electricity networks. Today, in the face of catastrophic global warming, a new kind of revolution beckons. But having witnessed Poland's impressive capacity for rapid positive transformation, how Poland has succeeded in just 35 years since the first free elections to become the fastest growing economy in Europe, I gather no doubts that Poland will successfully transition away from fossil fuels. By embracing the green revolution, not only we're all safeguarding our future, but gaining much needed energy independence, energy security, and enhancing economic competitiveness. Today, I'm here with all of you to share how the EU taxonomy and the sustainable finance framework can support Poland to fund its crucial transition, how Polish companies and other economic actors in Poland can raise capital through the European financial markets and banking system to fund its journey towards a sustainable and inclusive future. Because the taxonomy is first and foremost a tool to help companies and other stakeholders to access the capital they need to transition. But let's look now at how it really works. How does it work in practice? And how best to show that through an example. So let's imagine I am the CEO of an electric utility company, and I am very conscious that the future of my company it is, through a large extent, depends on my ability to transition the company to net zero. So the first thing I'm going to do is to develop a transition plan. For that, I'm going to take the EU taxonomy that explains to me, and gives me the technical criteria that power generation needs to meet in order to be considered environmentally sustainable, and I check what is the state of each one of my plants. Now imagine I have 4 plants and each one, for the sake of simplicity, generates 25% of my revenues. So I start with the first plant, the second, the third, the fourth, and I see that only my first plant meets the criteria. That means that I am 25% revenue aligned. Then I move from the mitigation taxonomy to the adaptation taxonomy, and I see that I need to conduct a physical risk assessment of my operations. I commission the risk assessment, and the experts come back to me and say, look, you're doing pretty well, your plants are okay, except for the fourth one, which is in a flood risk area. And what you need to do is to implement measure 1 and 2, and this is going to cost you that much, that amount of money. So I integrate that, and then I take into account the needs to start with my second plant to meet in order to invest so it meets the technical criteria, calculate the amount. I figure out that's going to take me roughly around 5 years, and then I finish my investment plan and I go to the bank and I say to the bank, hello, I would like to issue a green bond if possible, a EU green bond following the standard. And here is my investment plan to transform my second plant and to adapt my fourth plant in line with the taxonomy. The bank is very happy because it knows, what a huge demand the green bonds have in the market. I'm hoping to benefit from the greenium in primary markets, but in any case, just from the huge demand. I might also want to ask instead for a series of green loans. The bank, again, is quite happy because it can bundle them together, and securitize them. And in any case, the bank also needs to report on the alignment of their lending portfolio against the taxonomy. But if I am a listed company, I know that from now on, each one of my shares, both equity and general purpose bonds, will have two figures attached to them, 25% of revenue alignment, and let's say that every year during those 5 years, I'm roughly investing 75% of my capital investment. So 75% of my capex. So you would say, well, that all sounds really good, but this is very theoretical. And I would say, well, this is exactly what is starting to happen on the ground. We're starting to have the first results of the 1,700 largest listed companies in Europe. And although it is early days, because as I said, it's only 1,700 companies and it's only for the climate related taxonomy, the figures that are coming out are much higher than expected. Revenues and capex, both of them higher than expected. Capex higher than revenues in 2023. For the fiscal year of 2022, the average on capex was 20% and over 60% for the utility market in 2023 as well. Around roughly 600 European companies reported capital investments, in line with the taxonomy of 191 billion. Now, for what we, this far in 2024, already they have been reported 249 billion. More interestingly, if we go back to my example, and you're saying, okay, but you still have two other plants that you need to upgrade. Yes, I cannot, take on board all the company at once. So what I'm going to do is set targets for my third and fourth plant for the future, and I'm going to describe my transition plan. Well, just like that, 600 companies out of 1,700 have done just exactly that and linked, and set targets and link the taxonomy to the transition plans. Now, I was saying before that my shares will have two figures attached, and that is really positive for me. Why? Well, interesting enough, because financial market participants, for all their financial products that either promote environmental characteristics or have a sustainable investment as a objective, need in turn to report on the taxonomy alignment, both revenues and capex, and their clients are very interested in those figures, many of them because they also have to report it. Well, today the European market, financial market, counts 56% of all assets under management with environmental characteristics or with a sustainable investment objectives. Even more interesting, stock market data indicates that alignment to the taxonomy correlates with positive market performance, as companies disclosing high taxonomy figures have outperformed the overall market in recent years. So now you start to see how the whole sustainable finance framework works. Well, why the taxonomy and the framework is starting to work on the ground, you may say, well, is that, there are no issues, everything is going, really smoothly? Of course not. There are plenty of room for improvement, and there are plenty of challenges that companies and other stakeholders are encountering. But we need to understand two things. First, that this is, the entire framework, it's so new. In a way, it's the 21st century new financial infrastructure, if you wish. So we are learning as we implement, and with the learnings, we're trying to readjust the framework so it works on the ground. At the same time, we equally need to understand that this big jigsaw that we call the sustainable finance framework, responded to a strategy, but each one of the pieces of the puzzle were developed and negotiated separately. So now that we're trying to put them together, they don't quite fit, so we need to polish them. So, in other words, the building blocks of the framework are finished, and now we have entered implementation phase. So that's where we are concentrating now our work. The platform is working on supporting the Commission in facilitating implementation. What are we working on? Number one, in enhancing the consistency of the different pieces, on simplifying, on avoiding duplications and lightening the burden. Number two, on expanding the taxonomy to cover as many activities as possible, especially transitional and enabling. Number three, we're working hard to improve the usability of the technical criteria, and we're working very closely with the Commission to simplify compliance of do no significant harm criteria and make it fit for purpose. Number four, we're working on developing further the concept and scope of transition finance so that the companies about transforming their activities can benefit from investors and banks' appetite for transition finance. We're also delving into the inclusion of just transition in corporate plans as a fundamental feature of transition plans to leave no one behind. And lastly, we're working on simplified approaches for small, medium enterprises to facilitate their access to sustainable finance and helping them to respond to the trickle-down effect in a very easy, simple, and practical, and of course, voluntary way. Now that, and wrapping up, now that the building blocks are done, it seemed the right time to do a first assessment, not only of what is happening on the ground, but also to start assessing the extent to which capital is actually flowing towards sustainable investments, which is the ultimate goal of the framework. This is one of the platform's tasks. We have developed so far the methodology, and we are now finishing fine-tuning the methodology, and we're working on conducting a pilot project. But the intention is that from next year on at European level, we start to really monitor capital flows towards sustainable investments to really allow us to know how much capital is actually going to which economic activities, which ones are being funded through which financial vehicles. This exercise will help us refine the investment gap. It will inform policy. It will allow, for example, to support underinvestment, much needed technologies, and it will allow for very specific policy measures to be applied at a time of competing public funding. More than ever, it is crucial to boost private funding to ensure capital flows are directed towards sustainable investments. More than ever, highly accurate and targeted policies are needed. Yes, the taxonomy and the rest of the framework is starting to work on the ground. Yes, it's starting to shed billions towards sustainable investments, but the challenges remain, and the platform is committed to help tackling them in its role as advisor to the European Commission. We're very conscious that the situation in each European country differs, and that we need to account for all 27 countries. I am most honored for having been invited today to participate in this extremely important gathering, and I hope that today marks the beginning of a stronger collaboration. Your engagement is vital as we continue our learning journey. We want to hear from you. Together, we can lay down the 21st century low-carbon infrastructure that Poland, Spain, Europe needs. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Check me out.
Hélène Viñez-Fiestas, very informative speech, inspirational as well. Chair at the European Platform on Sustainable Finance, Commissioner of the Spanish Financial Markets Authority. Thank you for being with us. I wracamy do Polski. I pozostajemy w wystąpieniach otwierających.
We are remaining in opening speeches, but one small change. please allow me to introduce someone whose name I haven't mentioned yet at the beginning because he wasn't with us, but it's definitely a person that requires no introduction. President Lech Wałęsa. Let me welcome him. Mr. President, in a second I'll invite you to the stage, but we are still staying with the plan of presentations as far as opening presentations. So at this point I'd like to invite Mr. Jacek Jastrzębski, the head of the Financial Supervision Commission. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, Madam Mayor, Mr. Prime Minister, Ministers, Mr. Senator, thank you very much for the great honor of presenting in front of you for the third time. I have the opportunity to speak during the opening of the European Financial Congress. It's a great honor, but also a challenge because it's difficult to maintain the attention of the audience and to say something new after presentations of people who have such key impact on Polish economy, Polish financial market. But opening presentation on the EKF is obviously a great responsibility and obligation. Mr. Domański said that the EKF is the biggest event of the Polish financial market. This is so. In this view, it's part of my obligation to be with you here. So at least once a year, I can share with you my observations of what I think are important things in the context of the supervision of financial activity and how we plan to function in the future. The opportunity is quite unique because I am the beginning of my second term, which on one hand allows me to draw, of course, from the experience of the last 5 years. On the other hand, it gives me quite a long perspective of planning. So I have determination to change the conditions into the actual future. I'd like my presentation to be connected with the most important issues in the debate. And so if we take a look at the debates that are taking place globally in the European aspect, then the main idea is a lack of certainty, which hangs over all the debates. Now, connecting all these perspectives, I'd like to entitle my supervision, financial supervision in the world of uncertainty, and to share my concept on how financial supervision should function, so it could be said, in the world of uncertainty. The fact that we live in the world of uncertainty is a truism. We've seen it in recent years. I've seen it in the light of my first term in financial supervision, pandemic, geopolitical tensions, conflicts, armed conflicts, evolution of AI, climatic changes, migration, cultural changes. All of that are factors which to a large degree affect economic activity. Of course, we don't know answers to many questions. However, what's most important, we don't even know many questions which we should ask. Therefore, we are dealing with a large number of so-called unknown unknowns. So we do not only know the answers to questions, we don't even know the questions we should ask. So in such view, we might ask ourselves how to conduct business activity, how to conduct financial supervision, how to find ourselves in the conditions of this uncertainty. Quotation from Maxim Tolop, who said about black swans this: black swans stem mostly from gaps in our view of the map of the world. So I think the answer to that is in looking for that gaps, that was white spots in the map of the world, and thinking how to decrease them, how to prevent their negative consequences. I'll share a few observations which will connect the perspective of financial supervision and the perspective of the necessity to handle the world of uncertainty. First and foremost, in the macro perspective, I think that our great responsibility as financial supervision is to know as much as possible, to have full knowledge on the functioning of the financial market. Those of you who represent supervised entities are aware of how much we do when it comes to obtaining information from you, various reporting activities, reports, surveys, tests of extreme conditions. This, of course, creates a certain field of knowledge, so you have a picture, an image of the financial market, of the economy. However, I'd like to emphasize that from my point of view, gathering information, collecting information is just the beginning of that exercise, because it's not to have just a picture of, but we need to know what's behind it, what it stems from, so that we can think, we know what can also stem from it for the future. So key from my perspective, and this is the message I'm directing at you, to ensure that we are going this direction, is also a message which I'm aiming internally in my organization, so my organization knows that we are going this direction. So to a lesser and lesser degree, we will be proud that we have data, we are able to present the data. We have to start being proud of being able to explain the data and what stems from them. This might be obvious, but the significance of such skills increases in the context of uncertainty, because in uncertainty, just empirical description of phenomena starts being helpful. They're not sufficient. So having the possibility of modeling, of predicting, knowing where such picture stems from, or what could be the next step in its shaping, only then we are able to adapt, we are able to react to what reality may bring. Also, when it comes to such scenario of the tails of probabilities, that is those scenarios where the probability of certain scenario is negligible, but if it happens, it has drastic consequences when it comes to the appearance of the so-called black swans. That's the macro perspective. What about the micro perspective? In the macro perspective, I think that from the perspective of financial supervision, the functioning in the world of uncertainty is of key importance to concentrate to a large degree than before on business model of supervised entities. It's a topic that I've already talked with my colleagues in my agency and outside, but we can see.
From the point of view of getting ready for what's coming and we can't predict, the key is to have a sound business model and to have adaptability of business models. So this is a trend that we have been seeing internationally in supervisors in a lot of legal orders. They focus on analyzing business models, because you can see from global experiences, ex-ante analysis, as understood by these models, allows you to avoid scenarios that are more costly for the financial sector when the intervention happens only ex post. Not to go into detail, that's not the time for it, for technicalities on business models of our supervised entities, but there are three key observations I would like to point out. One, quite self-evident, but still needs mentioning. Analyzing business models has shown us that entities which maximize their current profits, their benefits short term, well, long term, they seem much less resistant to those who analyze things long term and create potential to absorb future events and create a buffer for adaptability. Two, and that's interesting in my opinion. Currently, it's not enough to just have a strategy. It's necessary, and you have to require it from us and our supervised entities. You need to have a whole portfolio of strategies. In other words, the managers have to evaluate and manage on an ongoing basis and update the entire evolving strategic portfolios, so that at the end of the day, they can select the ones that seem the best for the given situation. And moreover, the attention of managers should not just focus so much on predicting the future, because predicting the future seems fallible. History shows that. And effort spent on predicting the future may seem wasted, may turn out wasted, but it won't be wasted if you prepare for the greatest possible number of scenarios. So you approach your strategy as a portfolio in terms of various variants. And last but not least, especially for banks, from our point of view, and evaluating their business models, of course, balance sheets, they have to be strong in terms of stability and soundness, but we also look very strongly at what Mr. Ministers have said. So ensuring financing capability for various needs. It has to be balanced. One, you have to take care of stability and security, and secondly, you have to be able to finance the projects that were mentioned before. And this care for combining stability with maintained capability of financing for various sectors of the economy, well, this boils down to great care for the long-term financing index. And this is at the same time about us caring about stability and capability to finance the economy as a whole. And the question about involvement of financial supervision in business models of supervised entities. This is a key question, but an open question as well, because traditionally this is something that is considered to be within the domain of ownership and management. But historically speaking, we can see that insufficient attention on involvement of financial supervision ex ante may mean that the costs ex post are much higher. So it seems worth discussing. I want to just highlight this point. I think that financial supervisors, especially in the era of growing uncertainty, that's where we have to go. And third, regulatory challenges. I need to mention this. The approach of understanding the essence and reason of phenomena. We don't just describe what happens. We need to understand, especially, for example, in this detailed nature of regulations and the number of them. You can see that the scope of economic relationships, social relationships, the scope gets wider and wider. And you can see more and more detailed regulations. Sometimes we can't see the woods for the trees. And because there is so much regulation coming up, you can see some inconsistencies between some packages of legislation. So I would even risk the thesis that the scope and expense of a regulatory framework may seem a risk, may pose a risk for the financial sector. So this forest of regulations may pose a difficulty for financial institutions. So to us as regulators, we understand that we have to be a competence center in terms of regulations in the financial market. Working with regulations, with laws, we need to monitor and enforce them. This is our daily bread. But also, the financial market expects from us, you who represent supervised entity, expect from us that we are going to be a signpost for you, that we will help you navigate through those murky waters or through this dense forest of regulations and laws, and sometimes they're inconsistent internally. I think that this role that we have will only be possible if we, as the supervisor, understand the essence of the phenomena that are regulated. So it's not enough just to find your way through those laws, technically speaking. This is not enough. We have to understand the nature of what is being regulated to a greater extent, and we need to know what the aim of the regulation is, because if we don't understand it more in depth, if there are any inconsistencies or discrepancies in the laws, we will just be helpless, both as a financial supervisor and you as the entities from the financial sector, supervised entities. Much like in business models and macroeconomic environment, we have no other way than understanding the phenomena rather than focusing on the description. We need to know why this happened and what the aim is. If we don't ask these basic questions, we will be helpless in view of the very detailed regulations and laws. And then four, in terms of adaptability, I would like to mention that we have to get used to facing new risks, new risk factors. We are all familiar with a certain risk matrix, and we learn how to manage it and supervise the management of those risks. But recent years have shown us that this matrix needs expanding to include risks of quite new character. For example, the loan mortgage grace period in Poland. Yes, the cost of this grace period for loan holders, this is an extended cost in this business model of variable interest rate. So is it the materialized mortgage cost? No. Is it a legal cost? No. This is a different kind of cost because it is related to what happened within the business model, a change in the business line. And there was a certain inertia-based resistance. Why should we change something that works well? Lack of change in the right moment meant that the costs were generated and banks calculated them. This is a good example of how we can break through the inertia in thinking about business models. Another group of new risks, they are exogenic versus the system. We're good at coping with exogenic risks, but endogenic, but exogenic, the external risks. They are different, such as, for example, sustainable development financing, ESG, for example, but also development of technology. And we are facing another revolution, mainly due to AI, and you have a very difficult geopolitical situation. The tensions there. So you have a new technological revolution with hybrid risks that are intensified. So you have another exogenic risk that operates towards the financial market. So number 4 was new categories of risk. Item 5, very important to me internally in terms of financial supervision. So desired attitude. I talked a lot about adaptability. Business models have to be adaptable, but it's also financial supervision that has to be adaptable. We proved to be quite resistant to external factors such as COVID or Russia's aggression on Ukraine or challenges that are faced by the banking sector. We proved resistance and resilient here, but it's not just resilience to external factors, it's also about adaptability. And this adaptability has to be present in business models, but also in the supervisory bodies. Now, what does it mean in practice? Simply speaking, over the past 5 years, I saw many times how very detrimental it is to be inert, to be just, to hide behind your mandate, just be formal about what you can and cannot do, and what others should do. And those recent years, because of the various events that were unexpected, made us go beyond this narrow understanding of your mandate, of our mandate. So just simply stepping forward before the front line. So in many matters, we did manage successfully to do it. Rather than looking for people who should be handling this, we asked ourselves, what can we do about it? And we took action. Sometimes this was perceived as perhaps doing more than we should, but now from the time perspective, I can say that yes, it was worth it. So this is something that I believe we should be pleased with. Because where would we be if not for some of our initiatives, such as Mr. Bielecki talked about those settlements. Yes, we might ask, where would we be if other institutions joined us? Rather than judging us, they could join us. But it's not what I want to talk about. I'm talking about this constructive, going the extra mile. And this sounds great. Rather than looking to others, just do the thing yourself. But how do you induce such attitudes? Because in theory, we can say that this is the right direction, but what do you do on the managerial level? This is the level. The managers are the natural leader in building attitudes. So how do we induce this going the extra mile? So there are 2 necessary conditions in order to promote such proactive attitudes. One is the skills, the competencies. If you don't have them, if you don't understand the phenomena that we are dealing with, any activity might be more detrimental or can be accidentally helpful only. And the second key factor is give the space, the secure space for the people who want to be active, so that in good faith and honestly and competently they can do these tasks in the interest of the state. For example, regarding the stability and security of the financial market, they need to know that the state supports them. And there's a great work to be done here. I think that this topic will come back here during the afternoon. But if we don't reach the consensus so that these people who want to act in good faith and want to protect the values that the state has put them in place to protect, if they don't get the stand of security and the interinstitutional consensus so that the people feel safe to be bold in action, if we don't do that, we will be promoting passive attitudes and make people look to others and remain inactive themselves. So I think this is important. And item 6, the last one, because I'm looking at my watch here, this is the daily managerial and supervisory work. Of course, we can't leave aside our supervisory work. This is the least spectacular work that we do, but it happens in the background. We monitor the indexes, and we monitor whether the stress test conditions are met by the entities. So I want to say it at the end that there are developmental aspects, but we can't leave aside the basic tasks that we have. So to sum up, so the main answer to uncertainty is adaptability. And we need to change. We know that. It's not enough to just change, because some will say, okay, we are changing, but this may not be enough. You need to change faster than your environment, at least not slower. And we expect this from the market and from ourselves. And to conclude, just a little bit about our mutual expectations between the financial supervision and the supervised entities. I said at the beginning that to me, the opportunity to speak at the opening of the Congress is an honor, but also an obligation. To me, this is not just an opening speech. I will be here with you throughout the 3 days, and my presence here is also my obligation towards the financial market community. But simply speaking, I want your expectations that you have towards the financial supervision to be articulated openly here in panel discussions or one-on-one, because that's why I'm here. And it's important because, like my colleagues at the authority say, I try to build bold attitudes in them, and I want to build them with you too. Even be constructive in your criticism. If there is specific content and there are things to discuss. So don't be afraid. Voice your expectations towards the authority. Yes, sometimes you are afraid of open criticism. You might be afraid that you'll be considered differently. No, my role is to tell you that this concern is unjustified. Tell us what you want to see in financial supervision. Articulate it. Tell us, because the market won't have your expected regulation and supervision if the market does not articulate your expectations. So please, you are here at the Congress, articulate what you need. One of my colleagues in our authority says, we have different roles, but our objective is the same. So I want you to take the opportunity of having me and my colleagues here. Let's work together. Let's find the common objective in our different roles. And I would like to thank you for your attention. So let's use our time here as best as possible. The Chair of the Polish Financial Supervision Authority, Jacek Jastrzębski, thank you for your speech and for these declarations, and definitely they will be used in discussions later. So now we are going to have the first session of the Congress, but before that, yes, we are going to have 6 chairs brought onto the stage. And I would like to remind you that the app that I mentioned, and I encourage you to install it. It is going to have a practical significance. And this is our ambition and expectation, because Polish presidency is coming in January next year. The Congress wants to encourage you to co-create the agenda of this presidency. So launch the app, and once you're there, you'll see that we encourage you to indicate topics on stability, sustainable development, financing system. What should be initiated during the presidency by the Polish government? I have not talked about it with the Ministry of Finance, but I had meetings where Minister Domański encouraged us to give us feedback to the Ministry of Finance. the ministry will be handling a large part of the presidency. So we need to know your expectations and your ideas. That's why you are more than welcome to install the app and use it. But now we are starting with the first debate. And I think that from my perspective, but also from your perspective, the most important thing that we have a special guest. A special guest, the host of the debate is McKinsey, but we'll have President Lech Wałęsa. Mr. President, please join us here on the stage. Can I say hello? Yes, you can choose. It's up to you. The president has the choice. Right, this is a debate with McKinsey as the host, McKinsey and Company in Poland. So I would also like to ask Sven Smith, McKinsey Global Institute Chair, Senior Partner, McKinsey and Company. Marta Pęczar, Director, EKF Research. Ludwik Kotecki, Member of the Monetary Policy Council. And Zbigniew Jagiełło, Manager, Strategies and Innovator. The debate will be moderated by Tomasz Marciniak, Managing Partner of McKinsey and Company, Polish branch. Tomek, over to you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, how about some introduction? Yes, by all means, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, so yes, coincidences happen in life, and oftentimes they decide about many things, they determine many things. And I learned to make use of such coincidences. And this is an accident, a coincidence. You invited me here. But I am a revolutionary, a peaceful revolutionary, in fact.
As you know, I headed a big revolution which changed Poland, Europe, even the world. We brought down the old order, but in order to build a new one. And the fact that you have invited me here, I'd like to use it in the following way. As far as I can see, I have people of success all around me, but success in somewhat different field, the field of economy. I am a man of success, a big success, but in the field of politics, of revolution. All my life I have thought how to combine the two kinds of success. And it's possible if we are able to understand the times we live in. My revolution took place only because the technology that we had built no longer kind of fit this division into countries, blocks, states, and it simply required the freeing of these chains. And it was possible to bring down those walls, to break the chains, to build something new. Now, if we were able to connect the successes of my struggle with your successes, then we could have a combined success. However, we have to understand that we are living at a time of epochal change. From small divided countries, we have to move on to continents and globalization. To me, there is no question whether it has to be done. It has to be done. Moreover, many try to convince me that such technology that we do have today have been around for a long time, even higher. We can think, I don't know, even to the pyramids of the pharaohs and many other things which we are not able to build even using our technology today. And these immense civilizations of the past disappeared. So professors, academics keep thinking, how could that have happened? They can understand, but I, as a practitioner, an electrician, a simple worker, can tell them they disappeared, and we are going to disappear because they didn't do one thing. They didn't move on to management, into programming, they didn't move on to the level of continents and globalizations. They developed greater technology, but with these divisions, and with divisions, an explosion has to take place. That's why I would like to talk seriously about how we should understand the challenges that we are facing. We've been able to break our chains, but we still are not able to create a new reality, and it's dangerous. And that's all from me as a beginning, as a way of introduction. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. A good introduction indeed. The debate has been planned in such a way as to start with a couple of speeches, presentations. I'll ask Stan Smith from McKinsey Global Institute, a think tank of McKinsey in macroeconomic topics, and then Magda Panciu and Ludwik Kotecki will give their presentations, and to end with Professor Jagiełło and Mr. President to wrap things up.
I think I'm still seated, because standing up in front of the President here, I don't think it's working. It's a privilege to be with you, Mr. President, Your Excellencies, in the financial sector in Poland. I want to look around the room for a moment to the amount of gray hair, wrinkles in the face. And I'd say there's not enough wrinkles, not enough gray hair, but for one or two, for you to have been in a leadership position the last time something like this happened, a revolution, as your president just said. Maybe he was in a leadership position. Joe Biden also was. He was already representing Congress in Delaware in 1972. In 1972, I was 6 years old, and I was rollerblading on the highways of the Netherlands, because on Sundays my parents were not allowed to drive to conserve oil. Does anyone remember that? Some of you might have seen that. We are entering, and this may be the biggest point that I want to make, is a new era. We've had many business cycles over the last 20 years, but we didn't have a new era. We've had 3 new eras since the Second World War. We had the post-war boom, the era of contention in which the revolution took place, and we had the era of markets. You probably all have been living in the era of markets. It was great. It was globalizing, the supply was good, factor cost went down, it was digital. We had families in cities, we had fossil fuel abundance, climate concerns started to come, and we had cheap money. Anyone want to venture a guess whether any of these 5 are still true? They're not. So let's go to 1972. In 1972, the first oil shock happened, and we basically got a massive inflation that we are now through. We're probably at this moment in time in sort of 75, 76 of what happened in the 70s. But there was another inflation spike. I'm not predicting that one will come, but as a financier, you should take it into account. Why did the other financial spike come? It was not because the world was late with interest rates. It was because OPEC had 50% of the supply of oil to the world. And only when we diversified the oil down to 30%, we got control of the price. The supply announcement of the 70s sounded like this: Alaska oil, Mexican oil, Venezuelan oil, Nigerian oil, North Sea oil, Norway oil, Russian oil, Asian oil, and Nigerian oil. Have you heard an announcement like that on gas? I haven't. Have you heard it on windmills? I haven't. Have you heard it on solar panels? I haven't. Until we get that supply, we will be at risk of inflation. Let me give you 2 events. The Red Sea closed the Suez Canal by 60%. And do you know how lucky we were this year to not have major inflation? We were 150 boats lucky. What does that mean? Because Suez went down, we had to go around Africa. And we had the 150 boats to do that. Had we not had the 150 boats, we would have had another 10% worth of inflation, just from goods not being able to transport. When in Australia, a refinery announced a strike, they are sometimes good strikes, but they announced a strike, the oil price went up 40% and the gas price went up 30%. We are still very tight in supply. And in that world, I want to talk about Europe. Europe looks good. We had the elections yesterday. Fastest decarbonization, 14 of the 20 most equal countries, 8 of the 10 happiest countries. All good, or not? Well, we are living in a world that is no longer globalizing, and the geographic distance in trade is flattening out. The geopolitical distance is actually starting to drop, and the import concentration is beginning to drop. I'll show some more dramatic figures like that. So China is reducing its import concentration, but look at the US. The US has a 20% drop in the last 6 years of reducing its imports from single sources, in particular China. That's why Mexico overtook China as the largest exporter to the US. The world is reacting to geopolitics. Geopolitics is not only about ideology, it's often even the other way around. Geopolitics is about supply. And if somebody has a lot of it, like 85% solar panels from China, or semiconductors from Taiwan, or oil and gas from the Middle East, or the gas from Russia that we had to go through recently, then you get this effect. The question, of course, is Europe acting as fast as the US? You see basically direct investment to Greater China and Russia has fallen, to the developed economies also, and developing economies is increasing. And developing Europe, and you know, this is a strange word because I think Poland is advanced, but the Eastern European part is catching more of the investment right now, and I think that is a good thing. I can go very detailed here for a moment by sector, but we, as Europe, we're the blue, we get a small part of the renewables of the electrical components and semiconductors. If we want to be sovereign, the blue dots on this chart on the left have to be a lot bigger, and the investment needs to follow. This is the situation of European competitiveness. We invest 1.6 times less, or the US invests 1.6 times more. Our R&D lags 1.8 times. The revenue growth is slower. The return on capital is much lower. That's why the money is going. And you know, the size of companies is also smaller because we're more fragmented. With the fragmentation comes beauty, don't get me wrong. But I want to say that if these numbers stay this way, the competitiveness of Europe will be substantially at risk, and there's no need to do that. But we have to make a step in CapEx and R&D investment. And to me, the metric for whether Europe is going to make it in a positive way or not is not how many headquarters we have, it's how many of the billions of investment go to Europe. And there's some issues that I want to talk about, which I will not do in all detail. But we think that a program that maybe the new European government should adopt includes innovation, includes energy, it includes scale, capital, talent, supply chains, and markets. But let me just highlight two in this geopolitical moment. The electricity price in Europe needs to be 2 to 3 times lower for our industry to be competitive. And no matter how we do the energy transition, it will have to be that, because we're competing with other people, as Mr. Draghi said, that don't play by the rules, and they don't have that high energy price. And our industry will not be competitive. We will have to have this resolve. And the second one that I would pick up is supply chains. Everybody has seen the Belt and Road from China. People are now building their own Belt and Roads to Mexico, to Vietnam, maybe to Eastern Europe. And the question is whether we are going to live from that as well. And to just close in simple terms for Europe, it means doubling innovation, 2 to 3 times lower energy price, trade supply concentration, 18 million jobs rotated due to AI. We probably have to attract something like 400 billion in investment. And hopefully Poland gets its fair share. But we have to think about this thing as something that grows in size, not gets smaller. Because growth is good to solve all these problems and not a mindset of making things smaller. Now, we can't go back to the 70s and start a new beginning. We can't go back 5 years and start a new beginning. But anyone can start today and make a new ending, which I think as an optimist quote. I think we should be optimistic that Europe has the talent. We have more people, we actually have the money, we have the designs, we have the creativity. We should just not be so naive that the rest of the world is playing by a set of rules that will let Europe be more papal than the Pope. I know you're a Catholic country, but I mean with that we lean into stuff further than everybody else, and as a result, handicap ourselves. We are handicapped due to fragmentation relative to the US and China. If we don't release other things, the total handicap is too much. It's time to release the handicap of Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sven. Switch back to Polish. Pani Marto, Pani...
Marta, Ludwig, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to say that our presentation is a bit of a beginning to further works. The recommendations that Ludwig will present at the end are certain proposals that we are going to work on in the upcoming months. Now, the question that is placed is whether global financial flows support democracy. Well, we were looking for certain connections between how global direct investments and global portfolio investments, how they support, and if they support the young democracies. If it is so, or if it's not, and if it's not, then I think that in today's world, where geopolitical risk is ever present, it means that on one hand, young democracies are not being built, and perhaps the money is going to those places where we don't want to go, the places we want to defend ourselves from as Europeans. So we definitely were looking for such connections, such relations, establish such relations. But if I can add a few more to start with, what we were dealing with the inflow of direct investments and portfolio investments. This is just this issue that we have taken into account in our analysis. We've concentrated purely on that. However, if we are going to look at democracy closer, we have access to a number of various democracy indicators. We've decided to select indicator prepared by the Economist Intelligence Unit. This is a research unit which cooperates with the Economist, and it's a democracy index which is prepared for a large group of countries. The indicator goes in the scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is, of course, very bad and 10 is great. And thanks to a very wide source of indicators, all countries are classified into 4 groups. 4 groups, that is full democracy, from full democracy, faulty democracy, hybrid regime, or totalitarian regime. Now, if we take a look at the last results of that index, we can see that to start with, we can see a lot of orange and red in Asia and Africa. That means that these are the countries in which the totalitarian regime dominates, authoritarian regime dominates. That the statistics generally are quite frightening because they tell us that 55% of global population lives in economies, in the economies of authoritarian regime. Now, if we were to take into account the number of countries, this means about 55% of the number of countries in the world. Now, also to give you a picture of what scale that is, what sort of foreign global financial inflows we're talking about, let me give you some info. According to IMF, this is a level about $2.7 trillion in 2022. Now, what we were seeing in the last years is that these are somewhat smaller in recent years. An even greater share in these economic inflows are taken by portfolio investments, not direct investments. But in connection with the fact that very often in young democracies we don't have a well-developed capital market, and you can't quite study the effect, we've concentrated on strategic foreign direct investments, and we've taken the year 2008 and year 2022 as the subject of study, and we summed up the value of foreign direct investments in division onto continents. And generally speaking, from our initial analysis, it stems that the continent which has attracted the most foreign investment, this is Asia, Asian countries. And this is also the continent which, in comparison to 2008, has attracted the most direct investments. The country which is going up, which keeps attracting countries which keep attracting investors, are also South American countries, but we have a very bad situation in European countries. In 2008, the value of direct foreign investments in European countries was about 50% of the global financial inflows. But in 2022, it was only about 3%. That's why this drop of attractiveness in investment attractiveness of European countries is very much seen, quite well pronounced now. What we also see, what we can also see, is that the smallest value of direct investments is recorded in African countries. However, if we do take a look at direct investments and the nominal value of how many of them there were, perhaps it's not adequate. That's why we've increased them to the level of the gross product, and then we rather segregated them onto, comparing them to continents. We have also created two periods, from the global financial period until 2014 and from 2015 to 2022, and we've done it due to the fact that we do have a lot of variability, changeability when it comes to financial inflows in individual years. Now, what results did we discover? As far as the attractiveness of individual continents in the context of direct investments to GDP, well, the first piece of information is that in 2022, this level of relation was much worse than in the two previous sub-periods, than the average for these two sub-periods. The second piece of information is that whereas South America, North America, and Australia have been pretty much keeping a more or less equal level of relations of foreign direct investments to GDP, then unfortunately such continents as Europe, Asia, and Africa note to record increasingly lower level of this relation. In the case of Europe, this is once again a drastic confirmation of the fact of attractiveness of direct investments, foreign direct investment.
In 2008 to 14, the average FDI to GDP ratio was close to 19%. Then in 2015 to 22, it was just 1.1%. And in 2022, Europe had a negative value of FDI inflows to GDP. And the final word from me. Now, is there a correlation? Is there a relationship or not? Now, we have made use of three types of information here. The chart shows you the democracy index described by Economics Intelligence Unit from 0 to 10. X-axis, you have the average level of FDI inflows to GDP, FDI to GDP, the period 15 to 22 on average. And number 3 is the size of the circle, and that is the variability of the relationship between, yes, FDI to GDP. So you can see very big blue circles and green circles. This means that European and Asian countries have a very big variability of FDI to GDP ratio. And the second bit of information, answers to a thesis. Everyone who looks at this chart won't see relations or interdependencies between capital inflows and the level of democracy. So that is what follows from our initial research. Ludwig has analyzed the achievements of other centers. Well, what is the answer to this question from your research? Well, other research has the same conclusions. So we did do some research for our Congress. Yes, it's other research, other researchers, and we checked what they studied, what conclusions they reached. Unfortunately, the conclusions are pretty much the same. But before that, I would like to show you a longer period, the relationship between democracy and globalization. This is very prominent here. This correlation between globalization and democracy. Yes, it turns out that, in fact, economic integration expressed or caused by globalization, mostly by globalization, more or less from mid-80s, it promotes democratic values, and it is conducive to consolidating democracy in various countries. This has really happened, we might say. But as regards the capital flows, yes, here the research differs here. First of all, there's not a lot of research here to combine democracy, to put together democracy and international trade relations or capital flows. There is very little research about it. In general, researchers don't address these topics somehow. Especially for capital flows, there's more research on trade relations, how trade influences or results from increased democratization in the world. Now, secondly, most research that's available shows statistically lack of significant relationship between democracy and FDI inflows. So this is what Marta has just shown you on those bubbles, those circles. So this has been confirmed by many available studies by other researchers. Thirdly, even political theories don't really speak about the ethics of movement of capital. Literature, political literature, economic literature shows that political theories are basically quiet on the ethics of capital movement. And then fourthly, it turns out that there are suggestions to say that an inflow of capital may strengthen the position of pro-reform groups in a given country. Generally, pro-democratic countries are more stable, more transparent. They are countries where we might say human capital or social capital is higher as well. So this may encourage investors to invest. And it turns out that democracy may be exported from more democratic countries to the less democratic ones. But what you can see in the studies as well is that these benefits from financial integration are only evident when certain preliminary conditions are met. So you have to have a certain level of institutional development in a country in order for this financial integration or for financial flows to really support democracy. This may explain the African issue. Perhaps, well, these institutions are simply not there to a large extent, and this capital will not support something that does simply not exist there. Now, how can democracy be exported? Well, there are two channels that are indicated here. Of course, by supporting economic growth, That's obvious channel. Richer countries, or those which are getting wealthier, find it easier to introduce new values, also because of the relationships that are established because of these flows. And secondly, of course, there is the direct support of favoring of democracy related to and the related social, economic, and political benefits. But we can see that capital flows or the inflow of capital may also reduce budgetary limitations in a given country. So it can have some negative effects. It may weaken the motivation to do reform in institutions or to reform the economy. Or especially if foreign capital may have negative effects in countries which have very poor quality of institutions to begin with. What also follows from this research, of which, as I said, there is very little, but still we can look at some conclusions, and they are very interesting. And we will see that much greater importance of the intensity. There are other factors which influence these. So the degree of development measured in GDP. So the rich countries will integrate better, or the geopolitical distance between countries. And last but not least, political system and other political factors, like I said before, they have small impact, but sometimes they have a positive result on credit rating, positive effect on that. It is not. Yes, the rating agencies do include some of those factors, and it happens, it changes for the better over time. And moving on to the final slide, some initial suggestions for questions that perhaps will be developed later on, like Marta said at the beginning. You have suggestions here that to support democracy with capital. And there's this idea that we came up with. When we're analyzing a similar product, so democracy-linked bonds and loans, because of course these can be loans as well. So loans where some of the margin, some of the interest rate will be related to whether you meet democracy objectives, goals. So the countries will oblige themselves to some progress in democracy rankings, and then they can have lower interest on their bonds. And this can be attractive for the issuers who want to reform and democratize themselves, but also for the investors who are socially responsible. And for that, of course, we have standards. A market standard, preferably a market standard, for such democracy-linked bonds and loans. We also suggest that the role of the degree of democratization needs to be increased in credit ratings. So if there is pressure, for example, from supervisors and regulators on the rating agencies, so that they include this factor, the factor of democratization to a greater extent, this would help too. And the stress tests, they could also include the risk related to investing in authoritarian, totalitarian countries to a greater extent. Yes, now speaking of the democracy-linked bonds and loans, they could have this nice mechanism inbuilt where, for example, 10-year bonds issued by a state which decides to improve its level of democracy. Now, if this government loses in the election in 2-3 years' time, and another government comes. If they don't follow the democracy path, they will have to consider that the debt will be more expensive. Servicing the debt will be more expensive. They depart from democracy, there will be higher margins. But if the government that takes over keeps improving democracy, then they won't pay high costs on debt servicing. So this would have an extra disciplinary character there. Thank you very much. Before I ask the President for a final comment, Mr. President, yes, we are now a day after the elections, 6 months before our presidency, and we are now hearing that our costs of energy in EU are too high, 2 to 3 times. Investment is too low, definitely, and they go to other countries. What's more, they are not statistically related to democracy indicators. We are hearing that our innovation is too low. The picture is gray, at least, not to use harsher words. So what should we do in this situation? Can you comment on where we are in order perhaps to raise our spirits a little bit? Hello, everyone. I have this quick comment on what Marta Pęczar and Ludwik Kotecki have shown us. Unfortunately, the belief in profit is stronger than belief in democracy. And from the data, we can see 2 things. Marta talked about the necessity to motivate countries in various ways, or discriminate against countries who depart from the democratic path. We had this phrase that the government will feed itself, which means that, for example, credit lines are stopped or credit costs are higher. Now, here we have heard 2 presentations, or 3, because Mr. President, Lech Wałęsa's speech was the most important. Now I would like to join in McKinsey's presentation when they went through the era of contention, 18 to 89, in this transition. What was missing was the year 1989, where we've had 35 years since that transformation, which to me, it seems is still not well understood, because Poland in 1989 was bankrupt in economic terms. This was well described by President Lech Wałęsa once, that in 1989 he said we had a dilemma: how to make a fishbowl out of a fish soup. And yes, we did succeed. After 35 years later, Poland, from the point of view of economic indexes, compared to other countries which started off at the same level, is in a very good situation. It doesn't mean that we don't have new challenges. At the same time, in 1989, we had the challenge that was well defined by Prime Minister Jan Krzysztof Bielecki in his book, How to Build Capitalism Without Capital. And we succeeded in that as well. We might complain that we don't have enough capital in Poland. The speakers before me, the Minister of Finance and of State Assets at Financial Supervision Authority, they did state that, but it doesn't mean that we don't have anything to build on. These are the bases for further growth. At the same time, the McKinsey presentation did not have another component that starting from 72 to 89, there was a very clear political change. I would say that America fed the Chinese dragon. President Nixon and the Secretary of State Kissinger started this game with China against the Soviet Union at the time, in order to play the Chinese card against the then most dangerous opponent. And over the 50 years, they used the democratic money to build a very strong player who was not democratic at all. When we had the 1989 revolution in Poland, the transition then, at Tiananmen, there was a massacre of mainly Chinese students and turnaround from reform socialism, from the reform by the Chinese Socialist Party, and instead they leapt towards state-run economy based on state-run capitalism. So again, this is not the kind of democracy that the US and Europe wanted to support, but it just simply turned out that way. So what comes next? If you ask me that question, I'd say that, of course, we don't have an influence on those big players. We just have to focus on ourselves. And our greatest contribution towards what we can give Europe is strong democratic Poland. Strong also with private equity, because what happened recently was perhaps a slight turn towards state capitalism, where private capital was discriminated against or even had to compete with state capital, and it was doomed to failure because there were means of coercion used by the state. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to apologize because I will not be in your good graces in a moment. But I can't stop being a revolutionary, a practitioner. So look practically at what is happening worldwide. Look after the elections, what happens in France, in Germany, in other countries, and consider what will happen if Trump wins the elections in the States. Do you know what happens? I do. I told you. We are living in a situation when eras are changing, and these eras are telling us everything that you had in the previous era, organized political parties, it is not something that fits the new times. And your behavior, counting the money flows, this does not fit the times today. You have to start thinking in terms of continents and globalization. This is my practical thinking. So what do we do in order to unite Europe? What foundation do we use to unite Europe, which is so divided and argues within itself? And you have to do it, otherwise we will suffer defeat. And there are two ideas at various meetings, two ideas on how to build and unite Europe. Half of Europe and the world wants to build on freedoms, all kinds of freedoms. Free market and a law keeps it together. And the other half says, no, that's not a good idea. First, let's agree on the values, and then we can do the law. So one side says values, the other says freedoms, and we can't overcome this division. But if we do, there will be another question coming. Okay, you want to have the unity of a continent, globalization, then what economic system do you suggest? So as you know, there are two economic systems.
Communist and capitalist and socialist, or communist. Communist looks better, theoretically speaking. Young people, to a large degree, support it. Why is that? Because it's a relatively simple concept, right? It's all nice, justice, equality, etc. It all sounds great, but they don't know that this can't be done in practice. Whoever tried to put that idea into life, the communist idea into place, well, we know how it ended up. So I propose that you should reject these old communist ideas in United Europe and so on. So you're left with capitalism, but capitalism means competition between countries. Very often non-fair competition, rat race. But that was back then to a large degree, in that old capitalism where there were individual interests of countries, and people ended up on welfare and unemployed, etc. However, we're creating a continent, globalization, and the end of such competitiveness. Let's leave the free market alone, and everything else has to be set, and find those who are out of work, give them work, give them good work, profitable work. This can be done when we are having a continental global look. It was not possible in the old capitalism because it was based on competition. So that's the second problem that's ahead of us. And the third problem, which we don't quite see, that until the end of the 20th century, countries in the social awareness, they still had God, right? They didn't maybe refer to him directly. It was called different things, but it did exist in social awareness. We were afraid of communism and the Soviet Union. We dealt with these issues. We were lucky, but the question appears how to keep in line those countries who have no safety mechanisms built in, who are not afraid of anything. Of course, we destroyed the old bad order, but it's time to create the new good one. We have to define the left anew, because these old ideas about the left are gone. Also the right, we need to redefine it. And our Christian parties, I keep looking at them. I don't see any Christians among them very often, frankly speaking. So what is that? So it doesn't fit the times. That's my point. Putting it briefly, our generation is living at a time when that old global concept, that post-World War II concept, basically is gone. We have a new epoch of technology and intelligence, and we're in between. But this third way has not yet been created. We have to convince each other to cooperate, and then we can build things up. So please, of course, protect your own interests, but also don't be afraid of politics. You should also not be afraid of politics. It shouldn't be the case that only the bad ones end up in politics. I was asking you, kept asking you, get into politics. And what were you answering me? Come on, first we make money, and then maybe we'll get into politics. And we have what we have. So I appeal to you. I appeal to you very strongly. It's a very dangerous moment, and the politicians will destroy their interests because you're not here. It's because of you things are so bad in the world, because such great people, such smart people don't want to go into politics, or offended by politics, by politicians. Without you, we can't save Poland, Europe, the world. So I appeal to you as a revolutionary. I can see it. I encourage Trump to be the president. So I have my conscience is not clear. I remember when he was not candidated, he invited me to Miami to some supper. He was asking many questions, and I've had enough of his questions. And I told him, "Come on, Trump. Listen, mister, I used to be an electrician. I used to be a president. You are more talented. You know more. It shouldn't be a problem." And he obviously believed it, and he went into politics. That's why let's not lose this opportunity. You're right. But in this old style, this adding, subtracting, will it work? Will it not? No, that's not the way to go. Today, you need a few really smart, wise people who will sit down and create a list of topics which don't fit into this individual country approach. People who identify these really crucial areas. Once they create that list, they should divide it into what should be done on given continents, blocks, and what can be done globally. Then the third task, think what structures are needed, what financing is needed to actually put it into place. 20, 30 years ago, I tried this idea and I said, there are 5, 10 topics that are going to be global, and let's give those to the United States, let them prepare solutions. If they prepare right solution structures, let them carry it out, and everybody else will just fall in line. It's minor topics. We keep them on our own continents, Germany, France, Italy, and Europe. They'll prepare solutions. If they prepare it well, say, okay, you lead the way, we will fall in line. That's the way it should be done. If this is not done, then unfortunately, this is how these great civilizations disappeared, because they did what we do. You know, no China, no the States alone can solve all these problems. Now we have AI also as well. But that's not the solution, because the solution requires continental, global approach and keeping it under control in this way. Otherwise, these things will not be solved. So, discussing all these subjects, these important points, bear in mind that the biggest, most important work that you do, politicians can screw it all up, because you are not in politics. So, thank you very much. And this is not the summary you wanted. I'm sorry, but that's my side. Wonderful. We're grateful. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you very much for your attention. That was a debate of Mackenzie, Company Poland, President Lech Wałęsa, Ernst Smith, Ludwik Skotecki, Stan Smith, Marta Pęczak, Ludwik Koterski, and Zbigniew Jagiełło. And Tomasz Marciniak, chairing the debate. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister Bielecki pointed attention to a very strong accent. Take a look at the screen. We have information. And here I'd like to mention that honor issue, which is in deficit, but that's the element of what's going to happen after 4 o'clock. So right away, I invite you to 4 o'clock. Presentations, we'll have discussions, debates, talks, especially a talk between Prime Minister Bielecki with Professor Snyder today about the relations of capital and democracy. Can we actually see better people? Then we'll have the biggest head of bank in Poland about innovative banking, and there will be more proposals aimed at you. So I invite you to be with us at 4 o'clock to the plenary session, and before that, please be with us at thematic sessions starting from 15:30. So here I'll see you in the Columbus room at 4 p.m. Thank you.
Ja jej wysłuchałam, wiesz, takich niedawnych przemówień, ona tam w kółko tak
Tak.
wspomniała, transition